I was 12, 13, and my friend called, and I had taken 3 bottles of pills, and my dad took me to the hospital. And I'm sitting in the car, and I'm like this, and my dad's doing the sternum rub on me. And I remember it like it was yesterday. I wouldn't be who I am if they hadn't called. I wouldn't be where I'm at. And if I had died then, I would have never had my child, and my dad wouldn't have had his grandson. And my parents would have lost a daughter. My aunts would have lost a niece. My grandparents would have lost their granddaughter, you know? And, you know, don't get me wrong, I'm not perfect by any means. I still come out the side of my neck. But I chase my recovery as hard and as fast as I chase my addiction.
One of the first things that I did when I assumed this role was to look at the causes of premature death. Premature death is defined as death below the age of 75. And so I think we can look at premature death and say we'd like to prevent all of them. So what are the top causes? And in the city of Worcester, the top causes are cancer, cardiovascular disease, and what are referred to as injuries and poisonings, which, when we look at this particular group, ends up being drug overdoses.
Drug addiction is the plague of the 21st century, as our former Commissioner of Public Health, Dr. Morse, would say. You know, it's one of those things where if there was an anthrax attack, this parking lot would be full of news trucks and reporters, but yet every day there's 2+ people in the state of Massachusetts that are overdosing.
The drug issue is substantial in that we have thousands of people, perhaps 1.5% of the population, who are entering treatment each year. We have something in the vicinity of roughly I would say 1.5% of the population that is using. We have approximately 1 in 1,000 that overdose, and 1 in 10,000 within our community who die of a drug overdose every year.
The City of Worcester's Department of Public Health received a 3-year grant to take a look at how to reduce the number of fatal and non-fatal overdoses in the city. And so we assembled this great group of people who really are very concerned, just like we are, about the number of fatal and non-fatal overdoses. So the purpose of it is to really take a look at the data that we have in the city, the data that was given to us by the State Department of Public Health, and to really come up with some concrete strategies as to how we could reduce the number of overdoses.
At this point, drug overdoses are claiming more lives in this community and in this state than automobile accidents, and so it is something that has risen to the level of a public health problem.
Well, the message of the Latin American Health Alliance, which is the organization, the nonprofit organization, is to help Latinos or Latinas in the greater Worcester community with issues regarding disparities in healthcare. One of the issues that we first took up was addiction, and that was Hector Reyes was very passionate and and believed that Latinos were not succeeding in other treatment facilities and they needed to be in a facility where they had culturally appropriate treatment and the outcomes would be greater. And that was our first thing that we did, was the Hector Reyes House. And so we're dealing with the disparities in healthcare by dealing with addiction first. My goal is to get him drug-free, but I need to have them know all the consequences. And obviously if there's a problem, they need to call 911, and they need to have, make sure that they know that there's not a problem with that, and that people are always concerned that that's going to be an issue, that you're turning somebody in, and really the whole point of that is to save somebody's life.
That was my best friend, Pablo. We used to call him Sombra. We call him that because he was a boxer. This guy, he was so good that, when he swung on you, all you saw was a shadow. But anyway, he did a lot of time. He did a lot of time with me, and he was my best friend. He just finished serving a 15 to 20-year sentence. He was in for 11 years. He was out maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I think somewhere around there. He sniffed a bag of heroin, and because someone was afraid to call the ambulance, dial 911, he ended up dying. And he didn't have to die. Someone was afraid, and I can understand, but he didn't have to die, But
we know that the vast majority of people who are in jail today are there directly or indirectly because of alcohol and drug use. We know that people who are in jail, who have addiction issues, when they get out, if they're not treated, they're going to have a high risk to relapse. We know they're going to die. We just really prefer they don't die. Every time somebody dies, who they take a little bit of you with them. When you know that many people in a correctional facility, you invest time, energy, money in them, and when they are unsuccessful, there's a sadness to it. So, and the other part, it's just doing the right thing. The substance abuse classes are really aimed at providing substance abuse education. We provide substance abuse, anger management, domestic violence awareness, relapse, reentry. But one of the things that we've been doing for the past couple of years in partnership with the Worcester Care is what we call our opioid overdose curriculum. And it really is aimed at giving inmates the information about their risk to overdose upon leaving jail. Inmates are at exceptionally high risk to overdose fatally within 72 hours. And that really is because when an inmate comes to jail, if he or she has had addiction issues, they've developed a tolerance for alcohol or drugs. You come to jail and that tolerance goes away. It's simply because they don't have access to the drugs. The body detoxes itself naturally, and the person then goes to a base state where they have no more tolerance. When they get out, should they reintroduce any substance or the substance of preference into the body, it's going to go eventually to the brain. We know addiction is a brain chemistry disorder. Once it gets to the brain's going to simply say more. And if the person was doing 30 beers a day before they came to jail, or they were doing 5 bags of heroin a day, they're going to think they can do that again. And the problem is they have no tolerance. They go out, they try to do that amount, and they simply go into overdose, and then can fatally die from it. We want that information out. We want the information to get to the inmates, to know the risk, to know the signs of overdose. But more importantly, what we want them to get is the message, which we really give very, very, very strongly, is in an overdose situation, call 911. Inmates, as well as most people, have all these myths and, you know, some simple remedies to, you know, how to help somebody in an overdose. You know, put them in a shower, application of ice to the body, injecting salt, and we go, you know, that doesn't work. And they'll say, oh, no, it works. And say, no, it doesn't. 911. And we would just harp on the fact of, you know, 911, these people are trained, they know what to do, they're going to get there, they're going to get there very quick. And inmates typically say, well, I'm not going to call 911. Why? I don't want to get arrested. And we really try to tell them, they say, you know, police don't want to arrest people at an overdose. You know, overdose, police are going, EMTs are going, fire's going, everybody's going to respond. I said, but the police really don't want to arrest anyone. I said, Grant, if you walk in and there's, you know, 20, you know, AK-47s and, you know, 200 pounds of drugs, all right, they're probably, but they don't want to arrest anyone. So really the thing policemen don't want to do is they don't want to have to go to somebody's house, knock on the door, and tell a person their loved one has died of an overdose. Okay? Policemen don't want to do that.
I'm an emergency department physician at the UMass Memorial Medical Center. I'm also the Associate Medical Director for Life Flight and EMS.
I've been a paramedic for 16 years. I began working on the ambulance in New York City, the Bronx. I've worked in communities such as Lawrence and Lowell, up in the North Shore, and I've worked here in Worcester, in the Worcester area, for many years.
So for a patient who comes in having overdosed and is at the extreme end of things where they're unresponsive and not breathing, which is the biggest risk, of course, is the first thing we address is we address their airway. We address the fact that they're not breathing. Whether that's, if we know the substance they've ingested and it has an antidote, we might give that antidote. If not, we're putting a breathing tube down their throat. We're putting them on a ventilator.
Heroin actually stimulates a series of nerves and actually depresses your central nervous system, which means that you begin to slow down your breathing and you begin to slow your heart rate. And actually, ultimately, most people die in heroin overdoses from respiratory arrest, meaning that the drug actually tells your respiratory system to stop breathing, slowly stops breathing. People then actually, over a period of time, once they've stopped breathing, they go into cardiac arrest.
We do get patients that have been either unresponsive for too long, most notably somebody who hasn't been breathing for too long, and so by the time EMS gets there, the ambulance brings them to me. They've had so much damage from lack of oxygen to the brain that even though their heart may still be functioning and they're still breathing, they're never going to quite wake up.
I feel in many ways that the issue of drug overdoses and the heroin use is one of those kind of issues people are afraid to talk about. It's a significant problem here in our city, and yet you don't have a lot of folks that are willing to kind of talk about the strategies we need to help folks. Clearly, treatment is a critical one. We all know that at the end of the day, having Narcan and turning someone around who has a large dose of heroin isn't going to get them sober. It's just going to buy them another day to go about their business. We need to have more opportunities for outreach to folks on the street, and we need to have more treatment opportunities for people when they're ready to come in for treatment.
I just want people to know that there are folks that care about what's happening in their lives. I want people to know that there are government elected officials who care about what's happening in their lives, and that everybody, I believe, given an opportunity, can be successful.
I think it's very important for people to understand that they are not placing themselves or their friends at risk by dialing 911 if they observe an overdose. That's an important thing. It is life and death, and that is one of the most important things they need to do.
Dialing 911 when somebody's going to die isn't snitching. It's not telling. It's saving his life, if anything, you know? And if you're afraid if something's going to happen, then you know what? Dial 911 and screw. But don't leave them there to die, you know?
It's an act of kindness. It's an act of making sure that a fellow human being isn't going to die as a result of a drug overdose.
You know, people say, well, what if I call and they've got warrants or whatever? You know, that's not, so what? They have a warrant. You might have just saved that person's life.
Call 911. You have to call 911. We've made a lot of effort to try and stress that this is a medical emergency. This isn't a legal problem. This becomes a medical problem, and we're going to treat that overdose patient as a patient first.
In any situation where you suspect that there is an overdose, call 911. It's simple, it's fast, and it will save lives.